Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for tuning in. As soon as you jump in, share the live. I am Assemblyman Faith B.Yisrael, and I'm here today to continue the conversation that we were having yesterday. Um, to continue the conversation we were having yesterday about the Tobago Autonomy bills. As soon as you jump in, please share while I also share as we go along. If you're hearing me okay, just write me a little message saying that you're hearing. Are you guys hearing me? Good day, good day, good day. Let's see here. Comments coming up. So yes, today we are continuing the conversation about the Tobago Autonomy Bill. Thank you, Valerie, for responding. Thank you so much. We are continuing the conversation. The idea is to really just let you guys know what is in the bill, which is what we started yesterday, what is in the two documents. So we started it yesterday, and we are going to complete it today. As soon as you jump in, please share. Let me also share with a couple of the groups that I have and so forth. So help me with that, guys, please. Thank you. Today we shouldn't be, I'm hoping that this lasts about an hour because I also have several other meetings that's happening this afternoon and this evening. So we're going to do this. Hopefully this lasts an hour or so. And then I jump back into other things. Assemblyman Zurisha is supposed to join with me, but she's having some issues with her cell phone, with her phone, which is what she's been using to do these sessions. So if she's able to join, then it would be wonderful. If not, then I'll just go it alone. It's just what we do. All right, so it's important for us to just get a sense. So yesterday, we spent some time yesterday going through the fact that we have two documents that we are trying to, two documents that we are working with. We have the Constitution Amendment Bill, which will amend the Constitution, which is the document that we went through yesterday. And in addition to the Constitution Amendment Bill, we have the Tobago Island Government Bill, which is what is going to, in essence, replace the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the current Tobago House of Assembly Act. So we have to look at those two documents. We spent the time yesterday looking at the Constitution Amendment Bill. And today we are going to spend the time looking at the other one, the Tobago Island Government Bill. So we've had a couple people on, we've had a couple people from the PDP go on the media. I'm seeing that there are other people on the media having conversations about it, and that is what we need. We need as many Tobagonians as possible, having these conversations, being a part of these conversations, sharing their comments, sharing their views, sharing what they think about it, because I represent you. I am not here representing myself. I am representing what you say we need to represent. And I am also here to speak on behalf of you, because there might be things that I personally disagree with, but I was not elected to represent myself. I was elected to represent you, the people of Tobago. So that is what we are doing. So again, really quickly, yesterday we spoke about the Constitution Amendment Bill. Today we would go through really quickly the Island Government Bill, the Tobago Island Government Bill, because that is the bill that is going to shift how we actually function in Tobago. That is the bill that is going to shift how what we now call the Tobago House of Assembly. That is what's going to shift how that actually works. So here is the Tobago Island Government Bill 20 21. As you can see, this is actually the document that was sent to us last Thursday evening. This is one of the documents that we had the conversation about in the Joint Select Committee meeting on Friday evening. So this is the document that we are chatting about now. Let me just remind you that tomorrow we are going to have a public session, the same way we had the session a couple of weeks ago after we had the Autonomy Bill. After we had that version, we had a Zoom session as part of our Black Table Talk. We are going to have that again tomorrow. I have to confirm the time, but we are going to have that again tomorrow afternoon, that Black Table Talk, where we are going to open it up, have a Zoom session, and allow people to participate in that process. Because again, as we have always said, this is not about us. This is not about what we want. This is about what the people of Tobago want, and that's what we are doing. What the people of Tobago want. That is what we are trying to garner, and that's what we are doing our ever best to discuss. So, as you see here, it is the Tobago Island Government Bill. So if this is passed, it has to go through. So just so that you understand, it has to go through the Parliament, which means it has to go to the upper and lower house, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. It has to be passed. Both of them has to be passed by special majority. Yesterday we read about the special majority requirement for them to be passed, and that is what's happening. That would have to happen in this case again. So here we are. As you know, there are several parts of it. It's arranged in clauses. There's a preliminary part, which is usually the part that talks about, the short title, that kind of thing. We have the Tobago Island Government. We have the Tobago Legislature, so it goes into details about what that is. Financing, how are we going to fund this thing? Transitional provisions, meaning given that when this comes into being, it means that the old Tobago House of Assembly would be, no more. So it goes into a lot of details about what happens to things that were in the middle of stuff while that was happening. And then there are general provisions at the end. And then we included two schedules, Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Now it's important for us to look at Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, because these are the things that would tell us what we have administrative control over. As it says, Schedule 1, the list of matters for which the Tobago Executive Council shall have exclusive administrative jurisdiction in Tobago. And then Schedule 2 is the list of matters for which we shall have legislative powers or law-making powers. And it's important to recognize up front that we have two different schedules. There are schedules for what we can have administrative powers over, and then there's a schedule for what we have lawmaking powers over. And it's important for us to recognize very, very quickly, that it's important to know what is in the two lists and to determine for ourselves whether these two lists are what we want the lists to be, and whether we want about whether we are willing to push. I'm seeing a comment. Hi, Chanel, thanks. I hear Mr. Wendell Berkeley making a statement earlier stating that those that oppose this bill are going against the years of work that we've done in Tobago, that done by Tobagonians. Madness. Has he even read the bills? Does he even know what his predecessors submitted? And I heard the statement too, and I wondered the same thing, because it is very clear that what was sent in 2016 is really not what they presented a couple weeks ago. And it was only because we had really really pushed a couple weeks ago, why they've made some of the changes. And, he was right about the part where we've made gains. They did make changes. As a matter of fact, I said it very publicly yesterday that we were happy that they were pushing and that they made changes, because many of the things, and this is a critical part, many of the things that they told us they could not have changed. Many of the things they told us they could not have changed because it was illegal and because they got legal advice and whole sorts of rigmarole story. This is the same stuff they went and changed, and now is different in this version. So that is why we are saying, those of us on this side is saying, let us keep pushing. Let us not just assume that because it has taken a very long time that we should just accept what is given to us. Let us keep pushing, 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 pushing so that we get as much as we can get out of this. We really, really need to be conscious that, yes, we've been doing this for a while. This is something that started decades and decades and decades ago. And those on the other side are trying to give the impression that this started, a couple of years ago with the consultations that Mr. Orville London did and so forth. But no, this started decades and decades and decades ago with A.N.R. Robinson and those guys. That is why we are so clear in our minds about what we want. And that is why we are not willing to just accept what they give us and say, yeah, well, thank you so much. And as a matter of fact, I'm really, really glad that we pushed back so hard a couple of weeks ago, because imagine if we had just sat back and said, oh, okay, well, we worked so hard. It takes so long. It's 40 years now. And we're waiting. It's 40 years now. This could push me back so far if we agree and just accept it. Imagine if we had done that a couple weeks ago, where we would have been. Imagine if we had done that. So the lesson here, don't worry what they say. Keep pushing. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, because that is the way. Keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, because that is the only way for us to get what we want, out of this. So let's go through what is written in this document. Let's go through what's written here. Again, this is an act to repeal the Tobago House of Assembly Act, Chapter 2503, which is the act that currently governs what we do, and to provide for powers and functions of the Tobago Island Government and the Tobago Legislature, and for related matters. It is going to be an act of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. And just here, the prelims, it's known as the Tobago Island Government Act. It comes into force when the president proclaims it. So the president would assent when it's passed. If it's passed, president assents, and the parliament then has to say to the president, you go ahead and proclaim it. And then when the president proclaims it, then it comes into being. Then it becomes the law in Trinidad and Tobago. And then they've gone into some interpretations. There is a fiscal review committee that we need to look at how that is composed. When they talk about the former assembly, they are basically talking about everything that was in the Tobago House of Assembly before this comes into being, if it does come into being. The former fund talks about all of the monies that, the Tobago House of Assembly had under its control. The House of Assembly means the House of Assembly of the Tobago Legislature. That is a new term that we are going to be using if and when this comes into being. The Tobago Act means any law passed by the Tobago Legislature. The Tobago Executive Council means the Tobago Executive Council that was established way back when. The Tobago Fund will be the Tobago Fund that is going to be established. It's going to be basically a transfer of money from the old fund to the new fund. The Tobago Island Government includes the Tobago Executive Council and its divisions, and then we have the Tobago Legislature, which is going to be the lawmaking part of it. It's important, again, for us to highlight, and I am paying special because they've made sure they put it back here. When reference to Tobago means the island of Tobago, Little Tobago, St. Giles Island, Marble Island, Goat Island, Sisters Island, and the internal and inland waters. They are talking about no boundaries. So when they speak about Tobago in all of this, when they speak about Tobago in all of this document, they are talking about the island the little islands around us, and the waters on the inside. And we will look at that carefully because that has serious, serious, serious ramifications as to whether what that means and whether that is what we want control over, whether that is all we want control. Good afternoon, Tevin. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all so much for joining. Please, as soon as you jump in, share the live so that we can have as many people in here as possible. Application, again, so we're starting heavy stuff. No provision of this act. No provision of this act shall be interpreted as to authorize anything that is inconsistent or in derogation of the Constitution. So it cannot go against anything that is written in the Constitution to authorize the operation of a Tobago Act beyond the confines of Tobago. So we can't put anything here that does not include the Tobago, that outside of Tobago. Authorize any convention, declaration, treaty, protocol, agreement, or any international compact of any sort whatsoever between the Tobago Island government and any foreign state. So it means that Tobago cannot enter into any kind of convention, declaration, treaty, protocol, agreement, or any international compact of any sort on its own outside of Trinidad and Tobago. And it cannot contradict with any obligation of Trinidad and Tobago in any convention or declaration or treaty that we are already in right now. Okay. The Tobago Island government shall not take or undertake any action contrary to any obligation of Trinidad and Tobago under any declaration, treaty, protocol, and so forth. And it also says, and this is critical, the Tobago legislature shall not enact any law contrary to any obligation of Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know why this is as a foreign state. I guess that might be so the legislature, the Tobago legislature cannot create any laws that is outside of what Trinidad and Tobago has agreed with any foreign entity, and the Tobago Island government cannot create anything outside of what the Trinidad and Tobago has signed to any declaration or convention or anything like that. So let's talk specifically about the Tobago Island government. We are talking about, in accordance with the powers under Section 75, blah, 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 of the Constitution, the Tobago Executive Council shall have exclusive jurisdiction for the administration, and it's critical to understand that part, administration of the matters set out in Schedule 1. Administration, meaning that whatever the national rule is, whatever the national law is, we have control to administrate over that. We have control to administrate. Hi, Pastor Baines, thank you so much for joining. We have responsibility to administrate over that. Administrate mean implement whatever they have put in place. That is what administrate means. Implement whatever they have already put in place. The exclusive administrative jurisdiction referred to on the Tobago Executive Council by subsection is related to the list of matters set out in Schedule 1. Yes. And that extends to such part of the territorial sea of Trinidad and Tobago, whose area of the sea having as their inner limits the lower watermark of Tobago, and as their outer limits basically 8 nautical miles. What they said to us on Friday is that even though this is what was written and this is what they had agreed to, they had decided on Friday that they would extend, as in the JSC. I don't know who is the they, but the JSC told us that even though they sent this document to us Thursday night, that the JSC had decided on Friday that this was actually an error and that they were going to extend this 8 nautical miles to 11 nautical miles. So even though this says 8 here, they really mean 11 nautical miles. But it's important to know that we are only talking about administrative jurisdiction, not legislative. And that is something that was said, another person from the other party on another program this morning was talking about the fact that we can make laws for up to 11 nautical miles. And that person is woefully said that in error, because according to this, we can administrate over it, we can do things in it, but we cannot make laws for it. So, for example, the one of the last things we did in the Tobago House of Assembly just before we closed is we debated on a marine rules bill in the Tobago House of Assembly that we had to send to Trinidad for them to then make rule, for them to then make law. And that included, how people, like reef tow operators, how they're supposed to operate out there, what kind of, that kind of stuff, how are we protecting the Buko Reef versus Nylon Pool and that kind of stuff. And what this is saying is that even after this passes, if it passes as is, even after this passes, that we would have administrative control, but we in the Tobago House of Assembly still would not be able to make any laws as it relates to any of that stuff 11 miles out there. So again, we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want? Is that what we want? Or can we do better? The same way we were pushing and got things better then, the same way we were pushing and got things better, we could keep, and I am recommending that we keep pushing because this could get better. We could have just accepted what they said last time. Remember last time they came and told us even the 6 miles that we had for administrative control was illegal and this, that, and the other, all kind of rigmarole story. They told us all kind of rigmarole story. And it was only because we pushed did they then say, actually, well, we was wrong. We gonna give all you the 11 miles, but only for administrative control, but not legislative control. And again, Tobago, you have to decide. Every single one of you have to decide whether this is what you want or not. There is supposed to be a meeting between the Prime Minister and Chief Sec every quarter. That is actually a normal thing that was in the old Tobago House of Assembly Act. Whether it has actually happened, I don't know. Whether it continues to happen, I don't know, but that is not new. The Chief Secretary may, if invited by the Prime Minister, attend cabinet meetings to have discussions about things relating to Tobago. 7, the government of Tobago may, by way of memorandum of understanding, authorize the Tobago Island government to act on behalf of the government in respect of any responsibilities. That is actually not new. The wording is slightly different, but the same thing could have already applied in the old THA. If there is anything the government of Trinidad and Tobago needs done in Tobago, they could have created a MOU between the Tobago House of Assembly to have it done in Tobago. So that is not new at all. That is not new. That's not new. That's not new. Where a statutory authority or state enterprise provides services in Tobago, that authority or enterprise shall do it in accordance with the policies or programs of the Tobago Island government. That is also not new. So whenever, any of these state companies, Tiantec, Wassa, all of these state companies, whenever they come to Tobago and do anything, they really should be doing it according to the policies and programs of the Tobago House of Assembly. That is not new. That has always been in there, and they're just bringing it back. Powers of the Secretary, they have responsibility to exercise general direction and control over the division. That is not new. Nothing in this act prevents consultation between the Minister and the Secretary. Also, that's not new. A lot of this has just been pulled from the old Tobago House of Assembly Act. Chief Administrator. There shall be assigned a Chief Administrator who shall be a public officer as outlined in the Constitution. The Chief Administrator shall be an accounting officer who shall be responsible for such division as may be assigned to him by the Chief Secretary. Also normal. Each division of the Tobago Island government shall be under the supervision of an administrator who shall be an accounting officer. Again, that is normal. That is everything that we have now. The terms and conditions of service of an administrator shall be equivalent to those of a deputy permanent secretary. Now, this is the part I am not sure whether this is actually new or not. I have to double check that as to whether this is new or not, whether the administrators were at the same level as deputy permanent secretary, because I understand that this may actually be new, where they've now elevated the administrators to deputy permanent secretaries, and that's a good thing. It means that there is upward mobility in Tobago, if that is what is actually the truth, and that is what is actually, if it wasn't like that before. That is wonderful. That's amazing. That's great. Amazing. That's fine. Appointment of contracts, it means that the government, in respect of the employment of persons on contract, the Tobago Island government can give contracts. Again, that is not new. That is normal, part of what we've been doing all of these years. Now we're looking at the Tobago legislature. Tobago legislature. The Tobago legislature shall be constituted by the President and the House of Assembly. What does that mean? It means that those who are in the House of Assembly, who are there as, how we, well, I should say used to go to the House every month to have sittings, blah, 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 to have debates, to have debates on bills and that kind of thing. When we do that now, it goes straight to the president for the president to sign, for the president to assent, for the president to proclaim, and then it becomes a Tobago Act. So this is actually something new. That is one of the things we had been pushing for all this time, right? It's important again to note, though, that in accordance, however, this whole thing where we can make laws, the Tobago legislature may make no laws with respect to matters set out in Schedule 2. Schedule 2. Schedule 1 is what we have administrative control over. Schedule 2 is what we have lawmaking powers over. I want to go through the act relatively quickly, and then we would get to the bottom where we have the Schedules 1 and Schedule 2, and we will spend a little bit of time actually looking at what is in Schedule 1 and looking at what is in Schedule 2, because that is where the crux of the matter is. I personally don't know why we have two different schedules, because in my mind, if Tobago has administrative control over something, we should have lawmaking control over that same thing, whatever it is. And I actually think that the better way to do it would have been to identify a set of areas where we do not have control over. So, things that are what they consider concurrence, things that are like what the federal government in the USA has control over. Things that national security. Of course, national security does not mean that we can't have our own Tobago security on the island, but national security is one of those things. Foreign affairs, of course, is one of those things that we could that we shouldn't, we can't make laws for. Of course, if there's any foreign affair issue that affects Tobago, they should have to come to Tobago and have a conversation with us about it first, of course. Stuff like that, I think is, so we would have had a very short list, a very clear, concise list of things that the Tobago legislature would not have control over, and clear list of what the Tobago House of Assembly would not have control over, because these are national things, and everything else would be under our jurisdiction. I think that was a better way to do it, but this is how they've done it. Again, Tobago, you have to decide what you wish. And I keep telling you all, we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing. No person appointed shall assume duty without being administered an oath. That is normal. The term of office of the member of House of Assembly commences on the day that he or she is elected or appointed to office. That is normal. There's a time limit for swearing in, and I can kind of skip through this because all of this is normal, where you need to be sworn in within a couple of days after the election. And if you're not sworn in within a month after the election, then it means we have to go back. Or if for whatever reason you then write to the president and say you're asking for an extension beyond the month, then that is fine. All of that is normal. That is what was there before. publication of names of members. Anybody who is now a member needs to have their name in the Gazette, and it needs to be on the outer door of the chamber of the House of Assembly. Honestly, I don't know if that was there before, um, but it's there now, and it's no sin. I honestly can't remember if that was in the rules before, as in putting it on the outer door of the chamber. Yeah, it's neither here or there. Remuneration of members, the salaries, allowances, and so forth are under the Salary Review Commission, which is what is happening now. That's a normal part of it. And it tells you that the Salary Review Commission has to do their report and send it to the Chief Sec, and we get paid out of the Tobago Fund, and all of that. All of that is normal. This last part, the Chief Sec, Deputy Chief Sec, Secretaries, Assistant Secretary, and Presiding Officer shall not engage in any trade, business, occupation, or other undertaking for profit or remuneration other than serving as a Chief Sec, Deputy Chief Sec, Secretary, Assistant Secretary, or Presiding Officer. So these categories of people basically can't get no other work other than this job. At least not for profit or remuneration. That is supposed to be a sole job. This section goes into the appointment of select committees, which is relatively, this is a normal parliamentary thing. You have all of these different select committees, like how these two bills now are before a joint select committee. What it's saying is that we can now have these same kind of select committees in the Tobago House of Assembly as it relates to matters listed in the 4th and 5th schedules of the Constitution, as it relates to any division within the Tobago House of Assembly, as it relates to any Tobago Act, or as it relates to any other thing, enterprise that is owned or controlled on behalf of the Tobago Island government. So any state company or whatever, we could have a joint select committee basically on any of those, and that is actually a relatively new thing. That is actually a relatively new thing that is there that we should take full use of. Again, those committees appointed for the purposes set out above are supposed to, meet as it should meet, appoint specialist advisors as necessary, and all of that stuff. All of that is normal thing. Then we also have what is known as the Public Accounts Committee. This Public Accounts Committee is actually something that is already part of the Tobago House of Assembly right now. It shall be not less than 4 or more than 6 members. Right now, the chair of the Public Accounts Committee is the minority leader, but they've changed it here now to say that it is any member of the minority if they are willing to act, if the one exists and if they're willing to act. And if there isn't a minority, if there isn't a minority, then one of the members appointed then could be the chair, and so forth. What is that Public Accounts Committee supposed to do? Sit on and consider reports of appropriation accounts, money expended by the Tobago House of Assembly, Auditor General reports. They need to look at those, any of the balance sheets or the financial statements of any of the enterprise, those state enterprise, those state-owned companies, or any other account that the committee basically thinks that it should be looking at. This was actually quite a bit of a situation last time, because even though we had the minority leader and he was convening these committees, he was outnumbered by those on the other side. Listen, these people have been showing long time that they don't want to account, that they don't want to have nobody ask them no question, nothing. They used to just refuse to come to the meetings. When I tell you refuse, they used to just refuse outright to come to the meeting. And if you don't have a quorum, then the meeting can't go on. So they just used to refuse to come to the meetings. It was amazing how much these people have shown that they simply do not care about what is happening, or they do not care to account to the people of Tobago. It is what it is. For the purposes of this section, an enterprise shall be taken to be controlled by the Tobago Island government if it is one that is, exercises or is entitled to exercise control directly or related to the affairs of the enterprise, or if it's like a board has board of directors, or if it holds at least 50% of the ordinary shares. So if the THA holds 50% of the shares, then it is classified as basically a state-owned company. And because of that, it can have its finances can be reviewed by the Public Accounts Committee. Then we have the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, which is a relatively new thing here. Again, consists of not less than four, but not more than 6 people, chaired by the minority, if there is. If there is no minority member, then chaired by any other member. And this committee is supposed to review the budgetary expenditure of the Tobago Island agencies to ensure that the expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with what the House approved. It's supposed to look at the budgetary expenditure of the THA to ensure that it's keeping in, like, it following the laws of the land, and the administration of the Tobago Island agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiencies and so forth. So it's supposed to like look at, okay, if we have a program or if you have a project that's not working, why is it not working? Why is it not working? This is a relatively new thing. If you listen to some of the parliamentary sittings, you would see that in Trinidad, they do have a Public Administration and Appropriations Committee that goes through line by line to say, why is this, what is happening, why is this not working, and so forth. If you are a member of the THA, you don't get, you're exempt from jury duty. The THA is a public body as it relates to the Prevention of Corruption Act. That's normal, that was there before. Members of the THA are public officers as it relates to the Integrity in Public Life Act. So we are supposed to submit our public, our finances and so forth to make sure that's, a month after you become a secretary and suddenly rich. Or a year after, you went in with one house and a year after you come out with 5. It's meant to prevent that kind of thing, or to show that kind of thing, show it up if it does happen. It also speaks about the fact that we have the Office of the Legislature, which is basically the Assembly Legislature Secretariat that is there now, that has a clerk, has a deputy clerk, and all of that stuff. Normal stuff. The clerk is supposed to advise the House on parliamentary laws and practice and procedure, ensure that the Tobago legislature is provided with the proper staff, services, property, everything. It's supposed to be responsible for managing and administration of the office of the Tobago legislature, and basically ensures that what is the function of the Tobago legislature actually happens the way it should. The Chief Secretary is responsible for the Chief Secretary, acting on the recommendation of secretaries responsible for finance after consulting with the Clerk of the House from any time, may actually get stuff published in the Gazette as is necessary for public knowledge. Again, appointment of clerk and deputy clerk, normal processes for appointing, because they are public servants, basically. The equivalent of an administrator, basically. The Salaries Review Commission shall from time to time approve of with the approval of the President, review the salaries and conditions of the Clerk of the Assembly, the Deputy Clerk, and so forth. If you got secondment, meaning that you have a substantive appointment, but you have another appointment, you were seconded somewhere, there are provisions for that. These are regular public service rules that are there. And again, if we have a Tobago Act, or know that if this is passed, we would have laws as relates to Tobago, those laws need to be published in the Gazette. This basically says it needs to be published in the Gazette. Nothing new, nothing fancy, nothing to be too concerned about. Now we get to finances. Where are we getting money from to fund this? Tobago allocation, it should be no less than 6.8% of the total budget of the Parliament. Right now, the budget, what the Dispute Resolution Commission says is that we are supposed to get no less than between 4.03 and 6.9% of the budget. As you can see, we've always only gotten the 4.03 or close to 4 point something something. That's all we've gotten. But this now says it is now up to 8%, 4.6.8%, excuse me, of the budget. That's the minimum that we can get. That is the minimum that we can get. Of course, it's important to note, though, that if you have less monies, and that is what we've been seeing, the annual budget of the Parliament has been shrinking every year for the last couple of years. So even if we get 6.8%, we may realize very quickly that 6.8% of a smaller number is actually the same amount of money that we've been getting all of these years. So it's important to not get bamboozled by that bigger number, because it could actually end up being the same amount of money coming to Tobago as it has been before. The Tobago Fund, this is where the Tobago funding is supposed to go into, the Tobago money is going into. This is a normal thing. This is where any money is given from the Parliament should go, and any money that is collected, borrowed, or granted to the Tobago Island government is supposed to go into the fund. Monies from the Parliament is supposed to be credited to the fund quarterly, release in advance. So for the quarter, remember quarter is 3 months. So from the January, February, March quarter, we are supposed to get January, February, March money upfront in January. So it is in quarter releases in advance on block. So you're not giving me no money month to month, but you're giving me with 3 months money upfront first. Collection of revenues. This was in the old Tobago House of Assembly Act, and we didn't really do much about it, that we could collect revenues, and any revenues including taxes, levies, duties, and all of those things are supposed to be paid in Tobago. As long as you are operating a business in Tobago, you are supposed to pay in Tobago all of these taxes and so forth. So all of these banks, all of these large chain stores, all of these, everything that has a branch in Tobago technically should be paying taxes for that branch in Tobago to the Tobago House of Assembly. They haven't been doing it, but we have to make them do it. And whatever monies we collect would then be used to offset the allocation. So whatever we would have gotten from the central government, if we are collecting that in Tobago, then there's no need to get it from the central government because we're already collecting it in Tobago. Any monies that needs to be paid out needs to come from the Tobago Fund. The accounts of the Tobago House of Assembly needs to be audited as outlined in the Constitution. It have a long section about how auditing is supposed to happen. Oh, Heavenly Father, is like, nobody cares. Nobody cares, but it is there. It should be audited. If we have any monies appropriated by the Parliament, if there is any remaining unspent at the end of the fiscal year, then that should remain in the Tobago House of Assembly. If we surrender of surplus monies, if we have collected taxes or collected duties or collected all of those things, and it is more than what we are supposed to get from the Parliament, then we are supposed to keep 50% of it here and send the rest back to Trinidad, is what this rule says. By the way, this is not new either. This is what is currently in the Tobago House of Assembly Act, and they've just brought it over. This is new. Well, new-ish. Power to borrow. Powers to borrow. The Tobago Executive Council may borrow for any purpose relevant to its function under any written law, for the purpose of the prudent management of its financial affairs, for the purpose of investing as approved by the Tobago Executive Council, or for any other purpose approved by the Tobago legislature. So yes, Tobago can borrow for any of these reasons, but it is subject to the approval of the minister with responsibility for finance, which should not be unreasonably withheld. This last line is kind of what I tried to show well, they ain't go unreasonably say no. but you still need approval of the minister with responsibility for finance. Do we? Do we want to keep that? Do we want to leave it as is? Do we want to keep pushing? Do we want to keep pushing? The Tobago Executive Council can also invest money. This is something that is relatively new as well. So the same way we can borrow money, we can also now invest. And the newest part of it is that it is going to be invested in an account and managed directly with the central government, with the central bank, not central government, with the central bank. So this is something where we can have a direct link with the central bank, and we don't have to get any permission from cabinet. We don't have to go to the parliament or anything like that. It goes directly from what we want to do to the central bank, and we work in collaboration with the central bank. We are supposed to create financial rules, which we knew forever and ever, which we never created all these years. We've never created financial rules, which is why those people who've been there could keep, in essence, teething the way they've been, because we never created the proper financial rules to say, well, this is how we function in here, unfortunately. Description of property. Basically, any property that is under the control of the Tobago Island government is basically considered property or funds of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And then now we have what is known as a Tobago Appropriation Bill, which is different. And this is one difference that we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed for, and it is included in this. So remember before, we used to have to do a budget, send it down. So we make a budget for 5 billion. We send it down to Trinidad. Trinidad decide how much they want to give it, whether it's 2 billion, 3 billion, wherever it is, right? If this comes into being, the rule now is that the secretary with responsibility for finance will cause to be prepared and laid before the House of Assembly not later than 30 days after. That's the critical part. No later than 30 days after the monies which have been appropriated by Parliament for use in Tobago after the commencement of each fiscal year. So instead of the Tobago House of Assembly doing a budget in April, May, around that time, the way we normally do it, send it down to Trinidad, and then the minister reads his budget in September, October. We hear what we get September, October, and then we now have to come and figure out what we're doing with what we get. It is now flipped. We are going to then wait to hear what we are going to get September, October. And within a month after that, within 30 days after that, we then have to say, okay, this is what our budget is, because we now know how much we've gotten. And this makes more sense. This is what we've been saying forever, even within the last 4 years that I was a minority councillor in the Tobago House of Assembly. We were telling them every single year after budget, all you come back with a new budget, please, because we don't know what all you're doing. We ask for 5 billion, we get 2 or 3 billion. We don't know what all you're doing with it. We don't know what all you plan to do. We don't know. Come back with a new budget. They have refused to do it. As a matter of fact, they keep saying that they do it, and I have been in every sitting after budget, and I still don't know what they're talking about, because they don't come back with no new budget. They used to come back and tell us, these are our priority areas. This is what we are going to work on, priority area. That is not a new budget. That is just a list of priority areas. But with this new ruling now, with this new, if this comes into being, then we would then have to create our budget after we know how much money we are getting from the central government. And what we would have to do is basically create a Tobago Appropriations Bill, which is a bill that would then say this is a some money bill. Basically, everything that we were doing before budget, we are now going to have to do it after budget. If at the end, if let's say central government said they're giving us $3 billion, and we realize that for the fiscal year, it is found that that money is insufficient, it's not enough to do what we need to do. Or if there is something that came up that we did not really think about before, Then we can do what is known as a supplemental estimate, showing that the money is appropriated by the Parliament for use by the Tobago House of Assembly is not enough, and that we need what is known as a supplemental Tobago appropriation bill. Basically, we need more money. So if the 3 billion that they give us is not enough, we can then do this supplementary Tobago appropriation bill to show that, okay, 3 billion is what we got, but it is not enough. We need another billion for whatever. It can be done in this supplementary Tobago appropriation bill. Contingencies fund, which is all of this is relatively normal. The money that is left over kind of thing needs to go into the contingencies fund. It needs to only be used for certain things, blah, blah, blah. This is a critical part, and I'm rushing down because there are some parts that are way more important than others. Fiscal Review Committee. This is one of the things that we have to fight for, that we have to push for, because we now have a Fiscal Review Committee that, according to this document, is chaired by the Minister of Finance or somebody he picks. The Deputy Chair is a Secretary of Finance or somebody he or she picks. One other member from the Tobago Executive Council and 2 members from the Cabinet, which means that 5-member Fiscal Review Committee would have 3 members from Cabinet and 2 members from the Tobago House of Assembly. That is unfair. I spoke about it at the first public consultation. I spoke about it. They brought it back here again, like they didn't expect me to read so far down. I spoke about it again on Friday. That needs to be neutral, that needs to be better, that needs to be not so cabinet heavy, because as it is right now, it had 3 people from Cabinet, 2 people from Tobago House of Assembly. And when you look at what this Fiscal Review Committee is supposed to do, it needs to be neutral. It needs to actually be one that is equitable so that both sides would get a good, fair hearing. This is one of the areas that we have to push Tobago. We must push. We pushed to have them change the dispute resolution committee, and they changed it. Yes, they changed it. We have to push for this to be changed. We are not going to sit back and allow it to stay like this and to let it just do what they want. No. The people who are appointed to this commission needs to have at least 10 years experience in law, management, business administration, finance or accounting, or economics, because the point of that commission is to ensure that Tobago gets, I would read it. Let me just go down. So you're in hearing my words, but you're seeing what is actually written there. The responsibilities, so the committee is supposed to, no member supposed to serve less than 2 years or no more than 5 years. The committee is responsible for determine and recommend to Parliament the sums required to be appropriated to Tobago in each fiscal year. So before Parliament reads its budget in October, in September, October, this committee is supposed to say to Parliament, this is how much we think you should give to Tobago. You see why this committee need to be equitable. You see why this committee need to not just have Trinidad people and only 2 Tobago people. No. It needs to be more equitable than that. It needs is there to establish a mechanism for revenue sharing between the Tobago Island government and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Revenue sharing. What revenues might you ask? Oil and gas, we know. Oil and gas running out, we know. The rest of the world moving away from oil and gas. But we still have oil and gas in Trinidad and Tobago, and we still using oil and gas in Trinidad and Tobago as part of our main source of income. So we need to share more equitably in whatever we get from oil and gas for however long. It may only be for another 5-10 years. We don't care. It needs to be shared equitably. And this is part of what this Fiscal Review Committee is supposed to do. Now, we have there are other people who are stating that we shouldn't even just leave it up to this committee. We should have a set formula that says how much we should be getting and so forth. But, it may be a give and take. We have to see. But I'm just letting you all know, this is what is written. This is what is written there. That's why we have to push back on that Fiscal Review Committee, because it needs to be more equitable. It cannot be cabinet heavy. Tobagonians cannot allow it to be cabinet heavy. It needs to ensure that all revenues, fees, duties collected in Trinidad that are attributed to Tobago are put in the accounts of Tobago. So you need to calculate. Calculate, for example, even if courts decide that they're paying all of the taxes in Trinidad, okay, sure. But this fiscal review committee is to make sure that whatever was gathered from Tobago is allocated to Tobago, and we know how much we are actually contributing to it. It needs to ensure to initiate special audits on any fiscal matter within the Tobago Island government. It needs to give due consideration to the financial and development needs of Tobago. And to do that, it needs to take into account physical separation of sea by sea, physical separation of Tobago by sea from Trinidad. By the way, all of these things are here are also in the current Tobago House of Assembly Act, but they seem to use to just ignore it. Isolation of the principal national growth centers, absence of the multiply effects of expenditures and investment in both private and public sector made in Trinidad, restricted opportunities for employment and career fulfillment, and the impracticability of participation by residents of Tobago in major educational, cultural, sporting facilities, and so forth. So it's basically because Tobago is physically separated from Trinidad, it means that Tobagonians are actually disadvantaged continually, because when we get up tomorrow, we cannot get up tomorrow and go to Hazley Crawford Stadium. We cannot just get up tomorrow and drive to where the national football team is training. For us to do that, we have to root ourselves up, go to Trinidad. We are disadvantaged just because we have physically separate from Trinidad. So everything that is done when you look at getting the money and so forth needs to take into consideration that, to ensure that we have we are not further disadvantaged. So maybe we have a situation where we have one of those facilities or multiple of those facilities in Tobago and not necessarily having to go to Trinidad for it. So when we are calculating the amount of money we are supposed to get, it should take into consideration those things as well. And then it talks about transitional provisions. What does this say? I'm not going to go into all of them. It basically says that anybody who was an assemblyman before is still classified as an assemblyman in terms of them getting their pension benefits and that kind of thing, because remember, we are going to be moving from an old Tobago House of Assembly to this new island government thing. So it basically says any matters or rules that were in the Tobago House of Assembly that we started before will continue. Anybody who was employed in the Tobago House of Assembly before will continue. So it's really just that kind of transitional thing. Any staff of the Tobago Island government from before, whether you are particularly if you are a permanent a public servant before, transfer over, and then you can decide what you want to do. You can then write the public service commission and then decide if you want to stay in Tobago, if you want to go back over to Trinidad, and all of those things. So that is what that means. Continuation of association representation. So if you were in a union before, you could that is going to continue. Any agreements or contracts that we had before, those things will continue to the end. So if you started to work you just got a new 3-year contract, you did a year of your 3-year contract, this happens, then you don't have to worry that your contract now break or whatever. You will just, you have your other 2 years in your contract to continue doing what you were doing. So that's what all of these things basically says. This talks about power, the property and so forth in the Tobago Island government. It becomes Government of Trinidad and Tobago, or Republic of Trinidad and Tobago own. This has a thing about the finance. The Secretary of Finance shall hold them in trust for the Tobago Island government. Again, All of this is relatively normal thing. Any pending legal procedures continues over, any savings that we had transitions over. And then you have these general provisions which basically says that the let's see which ones are really important. The any reference in any law, so any other law where you have talk about assemblyman, now we'll call them assembly member. So instead of using the male descriptive, it's now gender neutral descriptive assembly member. It basically says that the Tobago House of Assembly Act will be repealed. It speaks about retirement allowances and ensuring that assembly members get proper retirement and that kind of thing, and so forth. And I'm skipping through. It also goes into looking at other acts and amending them. So the Interpretation Act, it basically says for many things, what used to be an act before, you have to add our Tobago Act. Different things. The Statutes Act that is being amended to take all of these new things into consideration. Skip through. And it also specifically says that the Tobago House of Assembly Order in Council 1898 is amended in Clause 2 by deleting the words, "The island of Tobago shall be a ward of the colony of Trinidad and Tobago." We always talking about this idea that how Tobago is a ward. They finally admitted that, yes, that is actually what is written in the Trinidad and Tobago Order of Council for 1898. After we've been complaining about it so long, and they kept saying, "Oh, it's not really a word, or you misinterpret what it's saying, blah, 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 blah." They finally admit that, yes, that is what is actually written in that order of council, and that those words are being removed. And now, very quickly to go through what is in the Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Remember, we said Schedule 1 is the items that we have administrative control over. Administrative control over. I heard a gentleman this morning, and bless his heart, I mean, I don't even think he understands what we have and what we are worth. But he was basically saying that we have when we sent down the document, we had 40 items, and this list have 41, so we get more than what we asked for, kind of trying to justify what is here, when in fact you should be pushing for more Tobago. All you need to stop electing people who think that all you and deserve more, under all seriousness. All you need to stop electing people who honestly in their heart believe that all you don't deserve enough. What you have is enough, and you should be thankful. Is basically the way they were touting it. We need to be thankful that we've gotten so far, and that we need to be so careful about how well. No. You all need to elect people who fighting for all their tooth and nail. Fight down to the bone. Stop electing people who just dare to say, well, all you get enough. Stop that. We need to stop that kind of foolishness. We deserve everything we want. Listen, we deserve it. Or don't let nobody try to convince us that we don't deserve it. Anyway, these are the things that we have administrative control over. Administrative, meaning whatever the rule is in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to just function. We just have to run it. We just have to do it in Tobago. And the list is long. It came almost exactly from the list. A lot of it looks almost exactly like what the 5th schedule looked like in the Tobago House of Assembly Act. This is what it look. A lot of it is the same. Agriculture, ComDev, construction and maintenance of public buildings, and the maintenance of the residence of the Prime Minister and President, cooperative culture and the art, customs and excise, education, including curriculum, but it does not include implementation of the national accreditation system. Okay, well, whatever. Emergency management, finance, That is to say, the collection of revenue and so forth, but it does not include banking, foreign exchange, national pension scheme, taxation. And this I do have a little thing, because I do think that we should be able to do our own taxation scheme in Tobago. One of the things we spoke about, we being the PDP, we spoke about was the fact that we should actually be able to set up Tobago as a tax-free zone or duty-free zone. We should be able to do that. That may be one of the things that we give up for now, but fight for it a little later. But I personally, I think we should be able to figure out our own taxation scheme in Tobago, because cost of living and stuff like that in Tobago, in Tobago is high, much higher than everywhere else. We should be able to do a VAT-free zone or VAT-free holidays and that kind of stuff. If we want to do it, we should be able to do that. But it may just be one of the things that we just accept that we have to fight for a little later. Fisheries, food production, forestry, health services, highways and roads, housing, industrial development, infrastructure, including air, sea, wharves, airports, public utilities. Again, this is another reason why the fact that central government is responsible for building the hotel, building the airport and stuff just angers me, because this is the same thing that is written in the current Tobago House of Assembly Act that we have control over, and we should be the one building the airport. Central government shouldn't be coming in and just putting down an airport. And like, I wonder if anybody in Tobago actually know what an airport even look like. That's ridiculous. Even in the Tobago House of Assembly, they don't know. That is ridiculous. That kind of disrespect is ridiculous. Labor, land and marine parks, library service, licensing, marketing, museums, cemeteries, also Office of the Chief Sec, except like public holidays and that kind of stuff. Office of the Secretary of Legal Affairs. By the way, that is something that we are going to get now because we have to make laws, except all of these things that are now under legal affairs in Trinidad that we don't really want to touch anyway. This list, planning and development, except all of these national things. Plant and animal quarantine, postal service, public utilities, except meteorology, social welfare, sports, state land, statistics, telecommunications, the environment, except the EMA and so forth, the Tobago legislature, blah, 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 blah. Tongue and country planning, so on. 42 says, and this is where this young man didn't even recognize that 42 was a special line. So he didn't even recognize that the fact that we asked for a certain amount and we get one more is because they just add a line that explains everything. Tobago, you need to stop voting for people who are not going to fight for you. Let me put it that way. Let me be politically correct. The Tobago Executive Council shall have exclusive administrative jurisdiction in matters relating to everything above, including the territorial sea up to remember we said earlier, it really is 11 nautical miles, I want to say. But again, administrative control, not legislative. So if we want to make a law, we would have administrative control over what happens in Bucco Reef. But if we want to get up tomorrow for whatever reason, I don't know, we may decide, well, we really, really want to give Bucco Reef a rest. Yeah, we really want to give Bucco Reef a rest. So we want to make it illegal to go to Bucco Reef. No, let's just say that is what, collectively we decide that is what we want to do. We cannot do that in Tobago. We still have to go to the parliament in Trinidad and have them do it for us. If we want to do anything out there in the water where we have to make a law for it, we cannot do it. We cannot do it. You all have to ask yourself, do you want that? And here is Schedule 2, which are the things that we can make laws for. And that's the thing, I don't even understand why. Look at the whole list. Agriculture, borrowing of monies or obtaining grants for the purposes of that, making loans, conservation, consumer affairs, culture, economic planning and development, education training, emergency management, employment, forestry, generation, supply and distribution of renewable energy, health and social services, heritage and historical sites, housing, industrial trades and businesses, land and buildings, other than the lands and buildings vested in the government, matters relating that came out of the Tobago legislature, prevention and control of fires, restaurant, bars, those activities, sports, the environment, tourism, transport, roads, highways. Now, the thing about making a list like this is, if we come up with something tomorrow that we say, oh, we want to make a law about that. It is not here, which is why it is wiser, which is why it is safer, which is why it makes more sense to say these are the things you cannot make laws about. These are the 5 things, national security, foreign affairs, whatever, that you cannot make laws about. And everything else, you could go right ahead. That, I think, is the direction that we need to push at. That is the direction that we need to push. And that's it. That's the entire bill. So yesterday, we went over the Tobago Constitution bill, and today we went over this Island Government Bill. As I said before, we are planning to have a black table talk tomorrow. I think it's going to be a little earlier in the evening. I have to confirm, but we will publicize it as soon as we get confirmation later this afternoon. We will publicize that. And what we will be doing is the same way we asked people to come onto our Zoom last time to share their questions, share their concerns, and so forth, because that is what we are going to use to make our submission to the JSC. We're asking everybody to do that. That's what we're asking everybody to do that. So guys, that's it. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions, you could ask it really, really quickly. Hopefully I would be able to answer it. If not, then I can't. If not, I can't. And we go from there. So any questions? Well, Chanel, thank you. Well, this is what we are here for, because I know human being, I know human nature. If I was not an assemblyman who was forced to read it, I would not have read it. And I want to make sure that Tobagonians are fully aware of what is in the document so that you could make an informed decision. So it is one of those things that we just have to do. So thank you. It's just part of what we have to do. It's part of the process. So guys, if there are no questions or no other comments, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you. Let me just put a link, by the way. Let me just see if I could find a link really quickly to put a link as to where you can download these documents. Let me put the link really quickly to where you can download these documents so that you can have them and so that you can read them yourself. And you don't have to worry about what I said, but you read them yourself. The 2, we've actually uploaded them to our something, Google something, I don't know. So this is where they are. So you could go click on them. You could go there and click, and you would get download both documents. All right, guys, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this process. This is tough work. This is hard work. Governance is difficult. It's just part of what it is. But we are committed to doing this and doing this right. We are not going to give up. We are not going to just sit back and say, well, somebody in a nice suit singing, kind of stuffy, come and tell me something. So we just have to accept what they say. No. I think they misunderstood Tobagonians. I didn't realize that we ain't afraid only and we ain't afraid that. So we are going to keep fighting. We just need you all to fight with us. Keep fighting with us. That's what we're asking for. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a blessed day and continue pushing. Stay safe. Ensure that you, keep push on. We will keep the push on. Yes. Keep pushing. Thank you all. Thank you so much. I'm seeing Joanne, so can you elaborate on the 6 mile zone? So what they've done is they have, since in this draft, they have extended the 6 miles to 11 nautical miles. But what they're saying is that we only have administrative control over those nautical miles, and we would not be able to make any laws about those miles. So yes, they've extended it past the 6 miles, even though a month ago, whenever they said it was illegal, and Thompson and Ambassador Thompson said that this, that, and the other, and the same 6 miles that they said was so illegal back then. They come now and have 8 in the document, but by Friday was able to change it to 11. But this is a critical part. We do not have, we will not have, if it stays as is, legal control to make laws. So if, for example, we want to do something on Bucca Reef, we want to make a law about how we want to function on Bucca Reef, we will not have the ability to do that in Tobago. We still have to send that to Trinidad. And that is where we have to push. It's little things like this that we have to keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing until we get what we want. We have to keep pushing until we get what we want. Anyway, guys, thank you for being a part of this. Share the live with other people who may be interested, and we'll go from there. We'll go from there. Dan said, I'm not even putting that comment up. All right, my dear. See you all so much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you. Thank you so much.